Hi, my name's TJ. This is In My Own Words, helping you create your life story. Well, welcome to the last episode, number 5 of 5. If you've made it this far, congratulations. Thank you for joining us on this journey. We've spoken about all manner of things to do with creating your life story. Episode 1, we went through an introduction. Episode 2, we talked about the kinds of things you might like to include for the content in your book or in your film. Episode 3 was mostly based about the process and hints and tips on how to make that as smooth as possible for you. Episode 4 was about the many formats that you could choose to display your life story, because it doesn't just have to be a book or an audio file or a video. It could be a number of other things as well. And also a little bit of an insight into the setup that we have here in the studio and how we've created what we've created. And today I get to introduce you to my dad. Hello, Dad.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm all right, mate. I'm all right.
It's good to have you here.
All the better for seeing you.
Oh, bless you, mate. And same to you. So today, what I thought would be really nice as a final episode is to talk to the person who has gone through this process and sort of pick your brains about, you know, how it was for you and the sorts of things that, the sorts of challenges and benefits and pros and cons and things like that you experience, so that other people can get an insight into how it was for you, if that's okay.
Yeah, that's fine, mate. That's fine. I've been through the nerve-wracking bit. Yeah. Nerve-wracking. Yeah, pretty nerve-wracking. Yeah.
Was it?
Yeah.
Well, I tell you. So I've got some questions all lined up for you.
I thought you would have.
Proper like interview style. So without any
bugger.
Without any further ado, should we crack on and I'll ask you a few questions. So
far away. Are we allowed to swear, by the way?
There's so many things I could say to that.
Keep it clean.
Do you know what? If you say f*** or
yeah.
then I'll bleep it out in post.
Okay, that's fine.
So we're going to start sort of chronologically. When I first approached you and said that this was something that I was interested in doing, and I really just wondered how you felt about me approaching you and saying, would you consider, you know, narrating and organising your life story for video? How did you feel?
Well, it was a bit of a shock, to be honest.
Yeah.
To start with, because you said, bloody hell, with nearly 70 years, you know,
you look well on it, by the way.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
I don't feel it sometimes, but there we are. No, but when the bombshell has sunk in, you sort of think, well, yeah, actually, that could be quite interesting, because I mean, obviously people have their photograph albums.
Mm-hmm.
They've probably got videos maybe of, you know, childhood years, growing up years, marriage and all the rest of it. But this is something totally different.
Yeah.
And it's a legacy.
Yeah, and I think that part of the thing for me was, I think the world is ready for a cultural shift in a direction where we're incorporating, you know, this kind of content. Because if you think about what's popular socially speaking, and if you think about what people like to do with their downtime, it's all about video content on certain platforms. And so if you get used to absorbing that kind of content and that becomes normalized, then when you look back at family photos, for example, that's not going to mean as much, and it's not going to be as like tangible to those people, because like, well, it's just a photo. And so I think this is a way of bridging that gap and saying, for my generation, we looked back at old photos and that made sense to us because we still took photos in my childhood and even now. But for the future, I think if you show someone a photo, they're going to be like, okay, but what does that mean, and who were they, and I'm not used to just looking at photos. In the same way that, you know, the community that is reading books is diminishing all the time with the mass distribution of film content, TV content on streaming platforms. I mean, it's absolutely overwhelming. I put on Netflix and I can't even decide what to watch because there's so much. So with the advent of all that, books, and I think the community that read books is in decline. And you know, I wanted to sort of future-proof it for you in that way.
I think the thing with photos is that is a particular caption of an event or a moment in time. And you can reminisce about, if it was taken on holiday somewhere, you think back, oh yeah, I remember when we went to so-and-so, and it perhaps triggers some memories of events that happened on that particular occasion.
Yeah.
The difference though between that and doing something like this is really for the benefit of the future generation, isn't it?
Exactly.
That is the key.
Yeah.
Because the children, grandchildren or whoever in the future are probably going to know nothing about the childhood of their grandfather or grandmother, what they experienced, the life-changing events perhaps that they went through, highs, lows, all that sort of thing. So from that point of view, it's quite interesting. I mean, my father, and I'm going back now, God, this is probably about 50 years ago, I would think. He wrote a screed, a long letter, which was about 10, 12 pages, handwritten in ink, summarising his upbringing. And the time,
I didn't know that.
Yeah. It's back at home. I'll show it to you. And it's actually addressed to you and to Vicky, funnily enough.
No way, mate. Why didn't this come up when we were making the film?
And it sort of details. I'm trying to think now because it's a long time since I've read it, but it details, the time that they met. His wife, or my mum, and the sort of experience that they went through. And there were also one or two things about, you need to show respect and all this, that and the other. But what I'm trying to get to is the fact that is in a letter form.
Yeah.
It's handwritten.
It was of the time. By that
exactly.
point. Yeah.
Exactly.
That's literally blowing my mind right now because I feel such a massive sense of connection all of a sudden that he had the forethought to do that.
Yeah.
And now I'm sat here going, I think this is something that people should do and championing this new movement, if you like, in legacy.
Yeah.
And that feels like quite I'm getting emotional. That feels like quite a connection.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
That's really interesting. You're going to have to dig that out and
well,
show it to me.
I will. No problem. But going back to when you first raised the question about, doing something like this, obviously it was difficult to know where to start.
Yeah.
Because there's so much that's happened. And I started to make notes of various times.
Yeah, I remember.
From the time that I was, at school, primary school, going right through education, then into working life. And it's almost like learning a play.
Oh, interesting.
In a way.
Yeah.
But my memory isn't very good, so a lot of the stuff didn't stick.
Well, you say that, but here's what's interesting. There's short-term memory, then there's long-term memory.
Yeah.
And people might tend to, box those two together and say my memory is bad. I would suggest that your long-term memory is extremely good, but some of the detail that you were able to, speak about your school life and your early home life was actually amazing. So not to be confused with the short-term memory of trying to learn those stories and remember the order and all that kind of stuff. But but having the opportunity to write it down on a script, because when we got to filming day, there were often times when you were like, can I just pause and
That's right.
read my notes? And then we just edited all of that out in post. I think your memory is really strong, actually.
Yeah, I'd like to think it's not too bad.
Yeah.
There aren't many grey cells left now,
No, replaced with grey hairs.
Plenty of those.
Mate, me too. It's having kids, isn't it?
Yeah. And one of the things I really enjoyed doing at primary school there was playing marbles. And the playground, dotted around the playground were various drain hole covers. You can imagine, obviously, for soaking the rain away, there'd be tarmac pointing down into the drain covers. And there were a group of us who used to play marbles on a quite regular basis. And I became quite skilled and proficient at marbles, to be honest. You'd stand a distance away from the drain cover, and then you decide to play with maybe 2 marbles each, or maybe 4 marbles each, or even 10 marbles each, if your hands could cope with 10 marbles at a time. And the idea was to try and shove or flick, using your little finger and thumb, flick the marbles from where they landed into the drain cover. And the person that finished up with all of the marbles in the drain cover was the one that won that particular game and pocketed all of the marbles. And then you go back and you start another game. Well, I managed to, I think, accumulate just under 1,000 marbles. And they're all in a great big cake tin, which currently is in the garage. But it's a prized possession of mine. It was one of the things I ever really won. And so I looked after them and marvelled at the wonderful colours inside.
Can you take us through the process on the day of recording? How did that day feel for you? How did it start? What was the sort of timeline, if you can remember? I'll contribute if
well, it wasn't in a studio like this.
No.
Because it was back at home, of course.
Yeah.
And the amount of equipment that you had to do it was probably a bit limited.
Yeah.
And a lot of it, I think, was a bit trial and error.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think I'm right in saying it was the first time that you'd done anything like that.
It was literally my first
so
major
it was
project.
a learning process for you.
Yeah.
As much as anything. But I mean, the fact that it was taking place at home.
Yeah. How did that feel?
Was absolutely fine.
Yeah.
I mean, totally relaxed, really.
That's good.
You were doing all the running around and adjusting the lighting and adjusting the sound and what have you.
And the panicking.
And I was thinking, bloody hell, how much longer is this going to take? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Because we recorded, I mean, we sort of dipped in and out, didn't we, throughout the day? I reckon I was probably all set up and recording for about 4 hours, something like that.
Yeah.
From memory.
Yeah.
And I think in amidst that we took or in amongst that we took a few coffee breaks or tea breaks.
Yeah. Oh, definitely.
I think we had some lunch.
Yeah.
And then so what I ended up with taking home was about 2.5 to 3 hours of footage.
Right.
To then take home to edit down into a 90-minute film. But yeah, it's interesting because obviously I thought it might be nice to do it at the house.
Yeah.
Firstly, because it means we don't have to hire a space.
Yeah.
And I didn't have access to the studio that we have access to now.
Yeah.
But also because it might make you feel more comfortable.
Yeah, definitely. I think something like this, I would suggest, needs to be done at somebody's home.
Yeah.
Because they're more likely to be relaxed.
Yeah.
Whereas in an environment like a studio like this, no disrespect, but it might be a bit overpowering, overbearing, overwhelming.
Yeah, fair.
Do you know what I mean?
Well, let me pitch you an idea that I had, because I think if somebody wants to talk almost like autobiographically and narrate their own story, I think it might be comfortable to do it in their own home.
Yeah.
In addition to that, if they wanted to have an environment where two people were, like, let's say the son and the mother, or the daughter and the father, or whoever, want to get together and have that intergenerational, exactly like what we're having now, that intergenerational conversation that affords the younger person to ask some of the questions that they might want to ask.
Sure.
You know, maybe a studio environment might be nice for that, because you've got your friend, your family member, your son, your daughter, your father, your mother with you.
Yeah.
So yeah,
but there's no reason why you couldn't do it in two separate lots, could you? I mean, you could do one presumably at somebody's home, and then you could do another section in a studio like this.
Yeah, exactly. Because the only reason I think you couldn't do what I've just suggested in somebody's home is space.
Yeah.
Because you'd have to get such a wide angle to get them both in, and the microphones and everything.
Yeah,
so
indeed. I mean, somebody's home may not be practically the best place, in honesty. Yeah. I'm only saying that because I felt relaxed.
Yeah, fair.
Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Mum and Dad met in Cheltenham. Mum was at a cookery college in Cheltenham, and she was there with my dad's sister, as it turned out, Auntie Buddy. And it was Auntie Buddy that actually introduced Dad to Mum, and that was how their relationship started. So my mum and dad had a very tough life, because obviously this goes back to before the war, and they didn't have a lot of money, as people didn't in those days. They lived in a cottage, and again there was no heating or lighting, I think, for quite a while.
So when we finally settled on a filming date and you'd been making notes and like channeling through all these various memories in your life,
Yeah.
Obviously that would encourage you to reflect on pretty much every element of your
Yep.
life. I'm
Yep.
sure. First of all, did you tend to do that chronologically, or did you just cherry pick moments?
I probably tended to cherry pick
Okay, that's interesting.
to some extent.
Just whatever occurred to you on the day.
Yeah,
And,
yeah.
And how long was that process that you took sort of making notes?
You'd lie awake at night.
Oh, really?
Oh yeah. Or I did anyway. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm not the best sleeper in the world anyway. I mean, it takes me bloody ages to get to sleep. But
Yeah, same.
for I would say probably a week or so.
Oh, wow, yeah.
I'd be thinking, oh God, yeah, I must remember that. You know,
Did you keep a pen and paper by the bed?
Yeah, well, I didn't go that far.
Okay.
I didn't go that far, but I try and keep a mental note.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Was it particularly engaging during that time as well?
Oh,
Did
was,
it give you
yeah,
something
yeah,
to
yeah,
like
yeah.
get excited
I mean, the
about?
trouble is, TJ, that even after the event's done and dusted,
Mm.
you still think back, bloody hell, I wish I'd mentioned so-and-so.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
So do you have any advice on that? I mean, like, because that was one of the questions I was going to ask you was, you know, is there anything that you didn't speak about that you wish you'd spoken about?
Oh, yes. I mean, I can't remember now some of the things that I mentioned actually in the video that we did.
Interesting.
But there are one or two things that I sort of think, if I didn't mention it, I wish I had done.
Yeah, yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So the crucial thing is you've got to spend time beforehand.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like revising for a test.
I agree.
You've got to think good time before the event, you know, and write down, okay, chronologically, I suppose, is the best thing in a way,
Yeah.
but chronologically, what you're going to talk about
Mm-hmm.
and what you're going to mention. So, yeah, it's several days.
Yeah.
Several
Wow.
days.
And were you nervous on camera?
Not particularly.
No.
Not
That's-
particularly.
That's
no.
good. I suppose. I mean, the way we did it in the living room, we had you obviously you were in one seat, I was in another seat, so it was almost like you were talking to me, wasn't
Yeah,
it? The way that you were
yeah.
telling the stories.
Yeah.
So that's quite an intimate environment, and like you say, if it's in your own home, hopefully that helps somebody relax. I was nervous for you, I guess.
Right.
That once the lights were turned on and the cameras were turned on, you know, a person could easily freeze up
Yeah.
and be like, oh, and panic. But I think, firstly, I think we had tried to allow ourselves as much time as possible for re-edits, and the first couple takes, it was like, let's do it again.
Yeah.
Let's do it again. You know what I mean? Because there were a few tweaks that needed making to the lighting or the position of the camera and stuff like that. And I think what that might have allowed you to do is relax,
Right.
especially into those first few stories that you told.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, I'm getting a second pass at this, and then I'm getting a third pass at this, and then the take that we see in the film,
Uh-huh.
you just seem so comfortable, so
Yeah.
relaxed, and be
Yeah.
like, well, you know, I was born in,
Yeah.
and it seems so natural. And I was like, I'm so glad that we've got these additional takes because
Yeah.
you know it's made
Yeah.
you look really comfortable, even
Yeah.
though we know that that's the third or fourth take, but they won't know that.
No. No.
And you talk very nicely, very articulately anyway. But I think, yeah, have you got any advice for anybody with like sitting in front of the camera, like how to ignore the cameras or?
I can well imagine there'll be several people probably that you come across who
Yeah.
are not at home, if you like,
Yeah.
in front of a camera and a microphone.
Mm.
I mean, I've been blessed by the fact that, you know, having been on stage and done plays and stuff, that it's almost second nature in a way.
Yeah.
And you just have to view it as an audience out
Yeah.
there. But there will be people for sure who will feel uncomfortable, and hopefully, as it progresses, they will become more at ease.
Yeah.
more relaxed.
And I think the other thing is, if somebody is particularly uncomfortable on camera, they probably won't gravitate towards a process like this anyway.
Maybe not.
Or if they do, they might think, well, I'd rather write the book.
Yeah.
So I'm not imagining, that people will need a lot of coaching to present on camera, because the sort of person that would want to do that in the first place is probably, dare I say, a little bit more extroverted, a little bit more comfortable being the center of attention. You know what I mean? Because otherwise you just wouldn't, would you? Like, I'd do it and I'd feel comfortable doing it. But I've got friends who'd be like, oh, I couldn't do that, couldn't do that.
That's right.
Okay, well, that's important, because it isn't for everyone.
No.
Or at least being on camera is not for everyone.
Yeah.
So maybe write the book, or maybe make the journal, maybe make the notes and hand it over to somebody to write a biography rather than an autobiography.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah. But one of the things I do fondly remember Broadstairs Holidays for was there was a pavilion. And you would walk from the Hotel Lancaster, to this pavilion, which is probably about, 3/4 of a mile walk, cliff top walk. And the pavilion used to have a resident band. And Cecil Barker was the guy that actually owned and ran the band. I can't remember much about the other people. There was a drummer and a violinist and a guitarist and a saxophone player. It was quite a good band. But in the evenings, they used to arrange entertainment. And one of the things was the programme that they gave you, and I think this was probably twice a week from memory. The programme that they gave you at the beginning had a list of all the different song titles from all sorts of things. So there'd be rock and roll songs, there'd be pop tunes, there'd be songs from the shows, song from films, and there'd be maybe 200, maybe more song titles at the beginning of the programme. And one of the competitions that they did was the band would play the introduction to one of these songs, and it would be up to somebody from the audience to actually say which song title it was, find the song title in the list, which were all numbered, and go up onto the stage to Cecil Barker and say, that's song number 179, or that's song number 46. And they'd be presented with a little prize. So I used to love going through this programme each day, memorising what the song titles were and what the numbers were of the song title. And I had to rely on Mum and Dad to actually say, that's so-and-so, that's Rock Around the Clock, or that's from My Fair Lady, and so on. So it was great fun.
So do you think that the process that you went through had any kind of significant impact on yourself and or the people around you and the people that have viewed it?
You feel a degree of pride in the fact that you've produced something or helped to produce something that hopefully others in the future will derive some interest from, and hopefully the children, it will be insightful, and they will treasure the final product. But I think from my point of view, I don't think it really had any impact, I would say. No. It was a pleasure to have done it. Don't get me wrong. And it was good fun.
Oh, that's good. That's a positive impact.
Yeah.
So from my point of view, watching you go through the process and listening to you talk about all the stories and memories and everything, and getting the photographs out and stuff, I felt let in. In a way, because I think, and we've spoken about this since, as a parent, you have to keep your children at arm's length to a certain degree in order to maintain the sense of authority, so that you can help them to grow into, and they have to respect you. I think if you want to, if you want them to grow as people and learn from you, that's my approach anyway. And so therefore you keep certain things from them that they don't need to know.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
because you don't want to burden them with that, and they've got their own growing up to do and their own memories to create. But then you reach a point in your life, and I certainly reached that point, where I was like, I don't actually know anything about you before my life. Right? Which is normal. That's totally normal for a parent and a child, because it never really comes up in conversation.
No.
Now I'm a dad, so I'm busy, like, all the time. I'm always busy with work, and when we come to see you, it's still all about the kids.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So we don't get to talk in that way necessarily. So for me, I felt let in to a whole life that I knew nothing about, and actually that helped me contextualize a lot of things. And gave me an insight into how you have become the person that you are, what a nightmare you are.
Oh God. Yeah, absolutely.
No, but like, in all seriousness, it's given me an insight into your upbringing, your formative years, your early work life, how you met mum and all that kind of stuff. So having been let in, I feel closer to you.
Right.
And it's also given us opportunities. When I've gone away and watched the film, or when I was editing the film, I was making notes about things that you'd mentioned when we were filming. That I was like, I must ask him about that because I really want to know. One of them was the car. We were talking about the watercolor of the car, and you mentioned in a heartbeat something along the lines of, and of course that was the car that I toured around Finland. Right. And that was all you said. And then you moved on. And when I was watching it in the edit, I was like, Finland ? And then, I came round to see you, and I said, I'd love to know more about Finland. And we had a conversation for about a couple of hours where you were telling me about your gap year after uni, and taking the car and meeting up with people that you'd met on the fruit picking farm, years before, and you'd stayed in contact, and you'd gone and seen some people in the north and some people in the south and stayed on their farm. And I was like, this is amazing, because we're only sharing a moment, we're only sharing memories, but I just felt really let in from that point of view. And it's also made me consider the idea that I want to do that at some point in the future with my own kids, if they're interested. They're interested. But I dare say there will come a point where they definitely will be. So if we haven't had those conversations by then, then I think that's interesting. Did you feel at any point like you divulged too much, or did you have any other? No. That's good. And did you feel like you had any other
quite open?
Any other regrets from the process or anything like that?
None at all.
No,
absolutely none at all.
That's good.
No, as I say, I just hope that there will be a lot of benefit to be derived from it in future. Your children, maybe even their children's children.
I've got plans for like generation and generations.
I mean that's where this is going to be of particular benefit, I think.
Yeah, I agree. Because I think the initial concern is, well, who would want to know about me? And when we basically had that conversation, you basically said those words. You're like, I don't want to know about that, do you? Who would want to know about that? And I was like, well, I would. Your grandchildren will one day, definitely. And I think the temptation is to underestimate the value of your story because we as individuals don't think we're particularly significant.
Right.
But I agree with you that I think the benefit is, a generation later, 2 generations later, and into the future, where people get to look back and go, wow. We're so obsessed at the moment with genealogy. You know what I mean? There's so much out there for like family history, and there's programs on TV, with regards to history, and I think that fascination, we have an opportunity to provide people with a wealth of information.
Well, I mean, one of the cracking programs on that theme is Who Do You Think You Are? Which has sparked all manner of interest. So it is quite fascinating, I think.
That's an interesting angle as well, because obviously we focused on what you could remember. And we focused on your life story as you saw it. But you could take a totally different angle, and you could say, right, well, I'm going to do my own research, go to the public libraries, go to knowledgeable historians in the local area, and educate myself on family beyond my own memory. And you could you could do your own Who Do You Think You Are?
You could.
That'd be interesting.
Get
the old family tree out.
watching TJ perform on stage, watching Vicky get her graduation. I think those are the two most memorable times. Dad passing away, and sad when the marriage broke up, really. But Dad passing away in particular, because he always, he did not want a funeral. So there was never really closure, if that makes sense. And I always thought that was a bit sad. I mean, that was his wish, and we all felt we had to abide by it. But it's strange, really, that it never gave people closure, or never gave me closure anyway, at least. But that, I think, probably was. And the other time, I suppose, was seeing Mum at the nursing home in Scarborough for the last time, when she was, that was a sad moment, really. The condition she was in, not very nice. But probably not studying hard enough. I felt I could have achieved more, I think. Not taking enough photos. First getting into the car, learning to drive. Going to the dentist. Having an eye operation. Excited. Oh gosh. I felt excited. Probably going away on holidays.
So did you have like a favourite part or a least favourite part of the process?
A favourite part or at least, oh God. Well, I suppose there are some times in one's life that you remember better than others. You have more vivid memories. And yes, undoubtedly there were certain parts that were, more enjoyable to recount.
Okay.
Than other
Yeah, that makes
times.
sense.
And that's quite interesting as well, in a way. I mean, it's important, I think, if you're going to do something like this, to not just focus on the good things, but there might be times when there were some sad things, and maybe one should include one or two of the sad moments in there. I don't think I probably included any of the really sad moments.
I think in one of the quickfire rounds that I did, we had a time when you felt, and it was a time when you felt happy, a time when you felt embarrassed, a time when you felt afraid, or all those kinds of things. And we had a time when you felt sad. And I think you touched on seeing Granny, your mum. For the last time in the care home.
In the care home. Up in Scarborough.
And I think you mentioned one or two other things in that moment. Because you say, it's important to embrace, isn't it?
That's right. Because life isn't always a bunch of roses. And I think it's important to balance it out.
Well, the bad times help you appreciate the good times. It's never as sweet without sour. That's the old saying, isn't it? And I think so. It's denial can be a very toxic trait I think.
Yeah.
I'm sure most people would agree with that.
Yeah.
And to go through a process like this and just ignore some of the negative things might be bracketed as denial that they ever happen, and let's only focus on the good things. And I also think that we're leaning into a trend that's happening on social media where people only post about all the great things that are happening to them.
That's absolutely right.
Yeah, and it's like, that's not healthy for you.
Yeah.
It's also not healthy for the people that are watching it, because what you spoke briefly about the divorce, if you don't mind me bringing this up.
Yeah, no, it's fine.
You spoke briefly about the divorce, and firstly, my hearing that humanized the process, because I only have, up until that point, I only had my own memories of it. I only had my own perspective of it.
Yeah.
And I don't think it had a major impact on me, because I was so young, incidentally.
No.
But yeah, it contextualized it for me from your point of view, and it really opened my eyes to what you were going through, what you and Mum must have been going through at that time, which creates empathy and sympathy.
Yeah.
And that I've come out the other side of that and thought, that's so important.
Yeah.
Because we live in a world at the moment where everyone's so wrapped up in their own journey, their own story, and they don't consider what other people are going through. Yeah. And actually, it can be quite enlightening.
Yeah, definitely.
And have a major positive impact on the relationship that you have with those people.
Yeah. And similarly, the demotion at work. Yeah. Which is sort of at a similar time. Yeah. There were three things really that sort of almost came together. Well, almost together. There was the divorce, there was the demotion, and there was Dad dying. So all of those sort of three all compounded to the extent that I was virtually on the verge of a breakdown. Yeah. So you need to, I think, probably include those elements to reflect on. It wasn't all a bed of roses. Life did have its ups and downs. Yeah. And it's a case of how you cope with that. Well, how did Dad cope with that?
Exactly that.
And if the kids in future, or the grandchildren in future, have a moment in their life where they sort of think, what the bloody hell are we going to, it's falling apart, my life is falling apart, how do I overcome this? You might be able to learn a lesson, maybe from what your I totally predecessors have gone through.
Yeah, and this harks back to the original point that I was making about keeping stuff from your children, which I do think is important to a certain age. Yeah, but it can be very enlightening and very beneficial to know that your parents are human. Yeah, they have been through a lot of stuff, and they have come out the other side, because that can give you strength. I think this is basically exactly what you were saying. Yeah. It can give you strength to go, well, if they got through that moment, and if they, in their, most difficult times of their life, and they got through that and they plowed on, then that, that gives me strength to know that I can do the same.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah. Yeah, that's a very interesting question. Did being a parent make me feel any different about my parents? In a way it did, yes. And I think the reason was that I had, looking back, I had a pretty lonely childhood, because Anne and Pete were so much older than I was. As I was growing up, they were almost flying the nest. So I didn't really, I felt quite lonely, I think, if I'm being honest. I felt quite lonely. And again, going back to the fact that I was never allowed to play outside the garden when I was very young. So I missed that sort of camaraderie of being with other children. When we went on holiday, it was sort of Mum and Dad would do their sunbathing and leave me to my own devices. So I did try to pay more attention and to foster a better bond, if you like, with my offspring than I felt I'd had with my parents.
So the last question that I'd like to ask you today is, having been through the process, having seen the film,
Yeah.
having watched the impact that it's had on me,
Yeah.
and the potential impact that it has for, grandchildren.
Yeah.
Do you have any advice for anybody out there considering going through a process like
Yeah,
this?
don't do it.
Don't do it.
No. No, joke. I'm only joking. I think people should seriously consider doing it.
Yeah, I agree.
For posterity purposes. The important thing is, for goodness sake, give yourself plenty of time before you actually go ahead with it in terms of sitting in front of the camera and the microphone.
Mm-hmm.
Give yourself plenty of time to reminisce and discuss with your wife, husband, children, whoever, because they may have some input into some of the things, and probably that's one of the things I didn't do, was to consult with others as to what should be mentioned or not mentioned.
But people remember things in different ways as well,
that's
don't
right.
they? And people might be able to flesh it out with little details that they remember that you go, oh yeah, that's right.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't, for instance, talk to my sister Anne.
Right.
Whether there were any aspects that she, and with hindsight, that perhaps might have been a good thing to do.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because she could probably have remembered some things about my upbringing that maybe I had forgotten.
Yeah, that would have been cute.
That would have been quite
that,
interesting.
For context, Anne, for people watching, Anne is 12 years older than you?
She's 12 years older than me, yeah.
So when you were born, she was 12, so she was always, so her memories of your very early life will probably be much stronger.
Oh God,
obviously, because you were a baby.
Yeah.
And perhaps how the dynamic in the household may have changed upon your arrival, because there's Anne and thean Peter, who's 10 years older than you.
Yeah.
So the two of them might have had I think that's a fair point. Yeah, that's a fair point.
Yeah. I mean, no doubt she would have spelt out the fact that, you were spoilt, Richard. You were spoilt. They've been constantly rammed down my throat. But there would have been moments, I'm quite sure, that she would have remembered, which I would have. Good point.
Yeah.
Worth mentioning that.
Yeah.
Preparation is absolutely key. I think, and try to be relaxed.
Yeah.
If that's possible.
Mm-hmm.
But as you said earlier, some people may find it quite difficult, particularly to start with.
Well, I think the beauty of writing a book, making an audio recording, making a video recording, in all of those examples, you can pause. Yeah. You can have a second pass at it. Do a second take. Yeah. Rewrite the chapter.
Yeah.
Before anybody needs to click publish or print or export the video file or anything like that. And I think working that into the schedule, like you say, because part of affording yourself enough time and preparation, I think, is knowing that just because I'm recording this today, firstly, doesn't mean I can't have another go tomorrow. Right. In all honesty. Yeah. You know what I mean? I mean, don't get me wrong. If there's a budget, if you're employing a videographer to come in and record it for you, that's perhaps you want to prepare a little bit more in advance just to make sure that you're feeling comfortable. Yeah. But if you're recording it off your own back, you can always record again tomorrow. You can always have another go the next week. You know what I mean? Yeah. And same with writing.
So when are we going to do it again?
Yeah. Well, I want to do mine. I want to do mine. And
that's the other thing is you don't want to put off doing it.
Yeah,
you don't want to get to the stage where you're so bloody long in the tooth and so old and decrepit. That you can't remember things. So if an opportunity comes along to do it, do it.
Carpe diem.
Yeah. That as well.
But I think you're right, because you never know what's around the corner.
No.
And you never know what's going to prevent you from doing this next month that you could have done it today. Yeah.
That's right.
We won't go into them, but I'm sure people can figure that out. You
Yeah.
know, I don't want to dampen the mood.
No.
But there are all sorts of reasons why suddenly it becomes something that you can't dedicate the time to.
Yeah, indeed. Do you know what I read on my BBC News this morning on my iPhone, because I do use the phone sometimes.
You got an iPhone?
Yeah, surprisingly
You don't have an
enough.
iPhone?
Yeah.
Is it really an Apple?
Well, no,
No,
it's not. It's one of these.
yeah, that's not
cheap,
an iPhone, mate.
No, sorry. Well, I like to call it an iPhone because I like to feel I'm up there, mate. Amongst the hoi polloi.
Yeah.
No, but I was reading on my phone.
Yeah.
About a cricketer.
Oh yeah.
Who played for, I think it was Nottinghamshire.
Okay.
Who's died at the age of 20.
You're joking.
I'm not. He's died at the age of 20. It was great future, and I think he was probably on verge of perhaps England team, maybe.
Yeah.
Or certainly was in, on the periphery.
Yeah.
But they haven't said what he died of. But I mean, that just goes to show.
Yeah.
That's no age at all.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. But so even people in their 20s, 30s, 40s,
Yeah.
it's worth thinking about doing something like this, I would say, rather than wait until 70, 80. A bit gaga.
I mean, the thing is, that's when people might want it. That's the only reason that the reason this came about is really because I got to an age where I wanted to learn more.
Yeah.
And I've said this to people. I probably said it in one of these films that we're making. I got to a point where I was like, I never really knew my granddads, either of them. One of them passed before I was born. Another one passed when I was very young.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Your dad. And yeah, so I never knew them, and I was desperate for my kids to know you the way I've known you.
Yeah.
And I really wanted to preserve that for them, and for them to enjoy that.
And only yesterday, one of them turned around and said, I don't want to see him again.
Yeah.
I want nothing to do with him.
No, they didn't. Don't be silly. They love you. Well, Jackson's a bit young to really know any different.
Yeah.
Now. But yeah, Varner loves playing
Bless
with you.
him.
Yeah, bless him. And yeah, in a weird way, I suppose this will also stand as a legacy, because now they'll have this as well. So they'll have the film, but they'll also have. Yeah. And I do think there's something in this. The reason I brought you in today is really to give an insight for people, who are considering going through it, to hear from someone who has been through it. But I do think there's something about showing the dynamic between the generations, between the parent and the child, and getting an insight into that, because there's value in that as well. I think tremendous value, even if it's only like riffing off each other and having a laugh. But this has been a pleasure. Thank you so much for coming in.
Well, thank you. No, it's been good. It's been good.
Yeah,
and thank you very much for the opportunity.
Oh, of course. Well, thank you for committing everything to video, because it
right.
really means a lot, mate. It really means a lot.
Okay, I'll send the invoice in due course.
Yeah. Okay. Just remember, I'm choosing your care home when
okay.
when the time comes. Keep me sweet.
Yeah. Couple of things that I'm thankful for. The genes I inherited, which have given me good health and sound mind. And the other thing is 2 wonderful children. And a lovely wife, of course. 3 pieces of advice for future generations. Be considerate to others. Be strong, and I don't mean physically strong, but I mean mentally strong. And respect your body and your health.
Well, I hope that you've enjoyed this series of 5 videos that we put together. If you haven't seen any of the first 4, I encourage you to go back and watch those, because they're full of information and advice on how to create your life story, and furthermore, how to tell any story, really. If you want to concentrate solely on your family life, solely on your working life, solely on your early life, or your own mum and dad, there's all sorts of advice in there that can help you with all of those various projects. I hope you found it interesting. I wish you so much luck and love on the journey. I think it's a fantastic thing to be doing. I would highly recommend it to everyone. So good luck in your endeavors. Drop your comments below wherever you see this posted. I think it's probably going to go on YouTube, but wherever you see this posted, drop some comments below and let us know how you're getting on, or a link to what you've created, because we'd love to see it. And all the very best for the future, and thanks for watching.